All right, so welcome everybody to Expand Your Practice. We've got with us now Nick, and he's going to talk about the whole thing here. And let me introduce him real quickly. A lot of you know David York because he's done podcasts and spoke at our annual conference and stuff like that. And David and his partner, now correct me, Nick, if I'm wrong with this, but David and his partner created this Corenology assessment for the law firm, and we're using it in the law firm. It was so good that they ended up setting up a separate company for it to run that, and that's where Nick comes involved. And so I met Nick when he and I and John A. Warnick and some others were speaking at a conference together. And actually, I think Nick, you took David's spot for that thing. He was supposed to show up or something, couldn't. And then we had one of our HTPs who used it and said, okay, you guys need to do this. So then Lori and I took it and we go, okay, yeah, we need to share this with the community. So here we are. And Nick, I will turn it over to you and let you go from there. But that should give a background for people to understand why you're here.
Awesome. Yeah, it's always curious why we're here. So no, I appreciate it. And so I'll just take kind of a full step back on the story. So for those of you that do know David York, an estate attorney, he's been doing it for quite a few years. And him and his partner, Andrew Howell, got together. It was right around 11, 12 years ago. And in that process, they were trying to figure out the families that transfer the wealth the best. What do they have in common? Right. And the things that they came up with is that they know who they are, they know what they value, and they know what they believe. And that sent them down this journey of like, well, do we believe anything? Or, right, and maybe Rod will find this funny, is that, oh, we're attorneys. Do we actually value anything? Right. There's always their speaking joke. So I may steal his joke the next time you hear him speak. But they went on this journey, right? And they wrote a couple books together. So they wrote Entrusted, The Gift of Lift, and then they wrote this book called Rivets, which is a book about core values, right? The 44 different core values. And so they've been along this process and this journey, and they developed this card game, if any of you guys have played, called Rivets, where they would sit down, they drop these cards down, and people will again find their core values through this. Well, a few things happen, right? How do we expand this? How do we get this to more people, right? It's a very hard tool, I guess, to use from a standpoint of you got to have the whole family in there together and playing the card game. And then COVID happened. And so they're like, how do we get this to more people? And since we're always, right, as we are right now in front of these screens during Zoom, they started this process. They got with Gretchen Figge, who is the CEO, and then a couple of engineers, and designed this software called Corenology. So that's kind of a high level version, the 30,000 foot view of why we're here today. And so wanted to walk you through this tool. And I want to show you a few statistics that are out there. And I know a lot of you have probably seen some of these, but wanted to kind of talk about the market and kind of the case that we're in, right? And we all know that we're in the biggest wealth transfer in the history of the world with, between numbers of 60 to $100 trillion that are about to pass hands. Well, let's look at the market and some of the things that Corenology is really here to help the advisor, but also to help the families accomplish, right? So we can go through some of the statistics, is that 70% of the time in death and divorce, the spouse will leave and go to another advisor. Also, when the kids inherit the money, there's close to an 85% chance that they're going to take that money and go to another advisor. So there's all these statistics that are going around that aspect of where the money's going during this wealth transfer. Now we can break down a little bit deeper into some of the other statistics of what the actual relationship with an advisor, an estate plan, or CPA is looking like during some of these interactions, right? And so as you can see on the screen, so 71% of the time, consumers report being more confused after they meet with an advisor than ever before. So the stuff that they're getting is, again, confusing them more than they were a little bit before. 94% of the time of clients ultimately chose to work with an advisor who gave them complete attention, listened without interrupting, and built rapport. Awesome. Okay, this is a great one. And then 70% of the time, financial institutions stated that understanding individual customer needs and local value propositions was one of their main challenges in meeting customers' expectations, right? So there's this qualitative versus quantitative feel that's out there. Now let's go a little bit deeper into the advisor perception versus the client experience. And so there's a couple different topics. So the planner is open to discussing what the client values most in life. Well, 87% of the planners agree. Absolutely, right? That's what we're discussing. But only 50% of the clients actually agreed to this statement. Planners' financial recommendations are based on clients' personal goals, needs, and priorities. 91% of the time, planners agreed that's the conversation we're having. But clients are saying that's only happening 49% of the time. Planners communicate importance of considering all areas of life when creating a financial plan. 81% of planners are like, absolutely, that's what we're doing. But yet only 47% of clients agreed. And planners contact clients on a regular basis to see what changes in life may affect the financial plan, right? So it's that custom touch that clients are asking for. Planners are like, absolutely, we reach out 85% of the time. Well, clients are saying that the email that I get, that your Q3 quarterly statement is now available, is not necessarily the touch that they had in mind, right? So again, there's this dichotomy between this is what we think we're doing, this is what we're actually doing that's happening there. And so how do we bridge that gap? A couple more statistics and we'll get into what the meat of this tool is. But again, as I talked about, more than 70% of heirs are likely to fire or change financial advisors after inheriting their parents' wealth, according to Cirilli. 51%, so more than half of clients who had over 10 million in personal assets under management indicated that they would seek a new advisor to oversee all their assets if they received a significant inheritance. And then 70% of financial advisors say developing relationships with clients' children is very important, and yet 22% say it's at least somewhat important. I've gone around and I've asked this question quite a bit too, is, by a raise of hands in these groups of how many of you were introduced or used the same advisor that your parents use. I think I've had 2 people, I have close to 500 to 600 individuals that have raised their hands. And so there's that connection that is just not happening. And so when we think about, right, that money of these children, right, who are making their own money and then coming up, it's that great opportunity to connect with them. But the more I talk and the more I have conversations, right, is how do we have those conversations with also not sounding too, filling your action verb there. So one more slide. So 78% of financial, I think we covered this one. Okay, so let's get into what Corenology does. And so before we get into this, I want you to take a pause because what you're about to see is a lot of information. But the cool thing is that within our reports, and you can see our 5 reports there, the values, culture, views, priorities, and obstacles can be broken up into 5 separate reports. So you can do this whole giant conglomerate, right? If you're going to have a team meeting or a family conversation, right? A family meeting, you can do the whole thing, right? And you have a lot of information to go through. But maybe if you're going to have a check-in or a meeting where you have just a little bit of time, you can pick one of these reports and send it out and the information you can get back to actually prepare you for that meeting. And so we'll talk about core values, right? So as we talk about the North Star, right? Going back to what David and Andrew were talking about, knowing who you are, what you value, and what you believe really isn't tied into values. And I'm going to give a definition and explain to what values are. We talk about culture, and we'll get to that in a few, but culture, when we think about values being the North Star, culture is the current in which it swims in, right? So your culture within a family can help you and push things along, or the current can come against you and push the family back. So we found a way to quantify what that looks like and give you a family number of what that culture looks like. And so those are the 2 reports that everybody in the family would take. So if you have, your client, their spouse, and all their kids, and we can go as many generations deep as you want to, all fit in that core values and that core culture reports. The next 3 reports that you see, core views, priorities, and obstacles, are just for your client and their spouse. So let's talk about values. Now, we all know the cousin to values, which is the personality, right? We're born with a personality and we're pretty much that person until the day we die, right? Not a lot of change that happens with your personality. You're introverted, you're extroverted. We have a lot of those tests. You take it once and you really don't change throughout that time. Or values are all experience-based, right? So when we think about the things that we've gone through in life, right? We are born into our parents' household and we have a set of values, right? They set forth these values of who we are in this family. Well, then you may go, you graduate high school, go off to college, your values are going to change. You meet somebody, your values can change. You may have children, your values will definitely change. You move to a new state, right? You move to a new state and a new culture, your values will change. And maybe a global pandemic happens and a big giant thing where all the values in the world change, right? So there's all these different experiences that we go through that our values change. But when we think about in the connections that we have with people, it's not like we wear these core values on our shirt sleeve and they say, oh, this is where your values are. And so that's where some of the conversations that maybe aren't happening or sometimes get disconnected with people because we don't know what people value anymore. So when we think about the parent and child relationship, these kids are changing so much in these early ages up into their 20s, where there's this, we may have heard this term of, oh, these kids don't value anything. Well, a little alert is that everybody has values. They just don't have your values. And so it's a way now for the parents to now connect to their kids and really open up and have another conversation of what's going on. And so based upon these values, we break values up into 4 different quadrants. So we have artistic, and no, that's not music and painting. So if you show up artistic in this, Rod did this, right? And we know he's not a musician, but right, he has connection, right? He has other values that sit into this artistic piece of it. We have inspired, which are like your faith and your wisdom values fit in there. Productive are like strength and determination. And then ethical are responsibility and justice kind of fit in those. We're all a mix of some of those, right? And so based upon that, we have designed a course style that kind of fits into what your personality, or not your personality, what your values look like amongst those pieces. So let's get into what it looks like. So you would send this assessment off, this link. Your client would take this report. The full thing takes about 30 minutes, but each report that we go through takes about 5 to 6 minutes for a client to go through. And so this information comes back, and now you have this really deep understanding of who your client is. So let's take John Doe, right? We all know the Does. And if his core values are knowledge, strength, and determination, the thing I'd love to do is take a minute to pause and just have them unpack where they came from, right? So John, why is knowledge important to you? Where did that come from? What is your definition of knowledge? Right. And it could be that a formal education is what got him to the place that he has in life. And so, making sure that he gets good grades and a continuous learner is probably what he values. Strength and determination could be a product of him being a CEO of his own business, right? And an entrepreneur. And if anybody's started a business, you need those values because you're going to have a lot of ups and downs in life and through this journey. And so having those values could be where he's at. And one thing to kind of go back to values and to kind of think about is that a lot of times when we get upset or, the buzzword offended is because one of those values has been challenged. And so when we think about that, the conversations and some of the disconnects that we have within relationships, a lot of it can be attributed to maybe those values are what had been crossed. And so some of those conversations need to be had. And so as you can see on the screen, right, you have John's, but also Jane's, right? So Jane is a little bit different than John. So she has connection as that number one core value, right? Courage, wisdom, generosity, and optimism. And so we also look into the styles of who they are, right? In this space, in this season of John's life, he's a driver, right? He's moving a business forward. He's a CEO, so he's got to move that aspect forward. Where Jane could be your typical stay-at-home wife, and right, she's a cultivator, right? She's cultivating these relationships. She's cultivating the relationships with her children, and kind of puts in the season of where she's at right now. And as you see, some of the other definitions will really help you understand exactly some more information about them, right? As you can read through, some of their key wants. Others may see them as some of their blends and some of their, driving questions, right? What is ideal and what is engaging? So the things that are important to Jane are, when she's going through and making a decision is what is ideal? What is ideal in this situation? And then what is engaging, right? How do I engage the family? How do I engage this decision with everybody? And so it's not only them, but now you get core values of the kids. So as you saw, right, there's a big change between these kids of Jessica's a little bit like mom, right? Connection stealing her number one, creativity, experience. But then you have Jason on the other hand, where loyalty, responsibility, right? He's got all these ethical core values. And so now it's an opportunity for the parents to have this great conversation. And myself and Gretchen, we've had these really awesome conversations with our kids to now we parent differently knowing what their core values are, right? My daughter has a core value of courage. Well, if you know her, she struggles mightily with anxiety, right? So she went off to camp this weekend. She's got volleyball tryouts that are coming up, and she kind of goes and breaks down a little bit, right? She gets quiet, she gets nerve-wracking. Well, before knowing that courage was in there, I would do the typical dad of like, you've done this before, get over it. You're going, you're trying out, right? That's not really helping the situation out a lot. And so now if I know she's going into one of these situations, I can slowly start preparing her and using courage, right? Using these conversations to really help understand where she's at. It's not that she doesn't want to go do this, right? She's kind of breaking down, but she values and she sees aspirationally that courage is such a high value for her. And so now I can connect with her on a different way and help her through this process versus probably making the situation worse, which I've done quite a few times. And so, right, the way that I parent in the relationship with my daughter, and she's 14, right? And so it's a way that I can help through this journey with her. I'm going to pause. I don't know. Are we doing questions or should I just keep it going?
Yeah. There's going to be some in the chat and stuff. Whoops.
Okay. So if there's questions, just, interrupt her. I think you went mute, Rod.
There we go.
You just
Now
put
can you hear
yourself
me?
on mute.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So there are some in chat, but I do want to stop here just because the conversation you and I and Gretchen had and pointed out that what was her son took it at 12 and then he took it again at 14
Yep.
and they changed.
Right.
And so, this is something this is not a one and done,
Mm-mm.
especially at those kind of ages when you're shifting. I mean,
Right.
which I thought was a great story.
Right. They're formidable years, right? And so that's why we recommend doing these every single year. Because to that point, right, your kids are going to change. But we could even go back to John, right? What if health showed up? So your client had health show up in one of his core values. As we get older, we've experienced a lot. So these values don't change as much unless big things happen, right? So maybe we retire, your values could change, or, things can happen. But if health showed up, it'd be a great opportunity to ask, hey, talk to me about health. Is it a family member get diagnosed with something? Did you, right? Did the doctor say, hey, cholesterol's a little high, Nick, maybe you should drop that a little bit? Like, what does that conversation look like? So it's a way to also connect, right? Going back to what these clients want more than ever is a personal connection. And so now you have this way to actually bridge this gap. And we've seen this used in ways of, being able to say like, hey, John, listen to this cool podcast on determination. Was thinking about you, send over that thing, right? So you think about those ways to connect, but also going back to that space of the kids leaving at an 80% clip because they don't have a relationship with you, right? Now you know what their values are, and you can do the same thing, right? Hey, Jason, there's this really cool Justice Expo that's in your town. I bought you tickets. I thought you would find that interesting, right? So just ways to now look and plant those seeds that, oh, it's no longer dad's advisor. This is the Doe family advisor. And now there's these connections that you can find that are actually intentional and purposeful to connect with that next generation.
Nick, I have another question that came in. Is this assessment able to be done by paper for the older generation that do not like technology, or as like a bonding activity that they can do at a meeting?
So as of right now, everything is online.
Okay.
Through that piece, we can, we can talk about having different ways to go about doing it from a paper standpoint, but as of right now, just say it's a digital link version.
Digital link. Okay.
Okay. And then one other question that I heard from somebody else when I was first talking about this, and that is, wow, this takes a long, what do you say, 30 minutes to take it the first time, if you take it all. Do you have to take it all at one time, or you had the 5 different sections? You could do a section at a time, right? And that.
Yeah, in our system, as long as you don't mark it as complete, you can still keep adding to it.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
So when we think about it, and I'll kind of talk a little bit more about what we think is the best way and what we've seen as the best results for people. Our 4th report is kind of the fan favorite to start with, which we'll get to in a little bit. But and kind of going back to the paper report is we do have worksheets that we can send so you can have some of those conversations and go a little bit deeper. But to actually do the full assessment, it's easier online, but we have other ways to really kind of engage in different ways too. So the last part about values, or we got one more part I want to dig in, but we also amalgamate all the scores. A big word bonus for y'all there, but we amalgamate all the scores to give now a family top 5 core value, right? So when we think about the identities within families, sometimes it's missing of who we are, and it's not that we don't know who we are, but sometimes just to go through and define what are the values that we have as a family, just sometimes are hard to come by. And so the fact that we're able to do this, so now we know as the Doe family, right? We're a family connection. We're a family of courage, knowledge, wisdom, and loyalty. So David and Andrew and the attorneys here at the York-Cal office, they put these in all of their estate plans, right? So that the trustor or the executor of the estate can make sure when we're making decisions, we can run things through these core values, right? There's a really cool example that David and Andrew have with the client, that they had a really cool business opportunity. And, some of their core values were loyalty, integrity, and excellence. Well, there was a big opportunity for them. They were going to make a lot of money by expanding overseas, but they were still struggling with some things. And so David asked them, or I forgot if it was David or Andrew, but they asked them, they're like, well, can you do this with excellence? And they said no, right? And decision was made over, because they couldn't do this opportunity with excellence. So it's a way that, businesses can do it, but also within families, and I'll show you, of the way that we can also resource our money. So within the report, based upon the values that show up, we will give resources that really kind of help you guys live out, right? Knowing who you are, what you value, what you believe, of ways to live out these core values. So instead of maybe writing the check and giving the kid the dollar amount, maybe we talk about charitable giving, right? And how do we bring them into that fold? A conversation that we have a lot, and I think it's really missing in the industry, is that forever we've been preparing the wealth for the next generation, or we should be preparing the next generation for the wealth, right? And ways we do that is now bring them into some of these decisions, or some of the ways that we show them what charitable giving looks like. So instead of, oh yeah, I know dad and mom are charitable, we bring them in, and every year we need to go pick out what are the charities we want to give to, right? Why do we need to do that? We need to present to the family, and then we choose amongst the family what's a charity that we're going to write the money to. So how do we bring them into that? If experience, generosity, wisdom, and knowledge, right? So we know how John Doe, right? Knowledge was number 1. Maybe we pay for college for each of the kids, right? Or, right, there's other ways of, what if it's a legacy property, because connection's a big part of it. And so every year the Does have a family when they're long gone that they know that the family can always go to and be together to live out that value of connection. So different ways that you can resource it. So that's core values. Before we go on to the next one, any other questions I can address, or keep moving?
Yeah, Nick, one question, when it comes to the family values, are they equally weighted, or are they prioritized 1 to 5?
So think about it in the sense of, you've got your 5 values that you see on the screen, but then 6 through 10 are also counted in there. We don't see those, right? So, but that goes into some of the math. So you can almost do a math equation of the top values were 10 points and all the way down to 1 of kind of how it's weighted through that aspect of it. But yeah, everybody, I think the mom and dad have 50% combined, and then the kids have 50%, if I'm not mistaken, of the way that the weighting works. I'm kind of peeking over, but yeah, neither confirm nor deny, but I think that's how some of the weighting is weighted into that aspect of it.
That's part of our
Yeah, but that's our secret. I can't tell you everything, or else.
Sure.
Yeah, we'd have to kill you. Is that the word?
And then a follow-up question with that, Nick, is for our engineers who like the details, and maybe it's in one of their books, but how did you come up with is it 4 or 5 different categories and the 44 different specific values?
Yeah, so again, they had 44 in their book. If we used all 44, that would have been a big, long report and assessment. So what they did is they took, what are the values that kind of all roll up into this category, right? And so we use 24 for the assessment purposes. And so I don't know if I know the exact reason why, the 4 quadrants, the umbrella of it, but I don't know the 4 quadrants of where the exact definition of where they came up with that, the exact answer. But yeah, we tried to take the umbrella of what, faith and wisdom, and what are the other ones that kind of mean some of those things, and put that into the inspired bracket and only did the 6 of them instead of having a big giant list.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. All right, so on to culture, right? So this is still another report that the heirs or the grandkids or next generations will take as well. But it would come out like this, right? And a lot of the reports are kind of like some of the games that you've played in taking assessments of, more than likely, less than likely is kind of how some of these are scored out. But a high score, 25 would be the top score you could have, down to 0 would be a low score. Now, one thing I want you to kind of be cognizant of is that this doesn't mean good, bad, or any of that type of stuff, right? This is a snapshot in time of where the family is in each one of these categories. And I'll even jump to impact first, is that just because these numbers are a little bit low doesn't mean anything bad. It just means the family doesn't really care about making an impact in the world. And that's okay, right? You don't need to have like, oh, we need to be 25, we need to make an impact, right? That doesn't mean any of that stuff. And this also to kind of piggyback on, this isn't for the advisor to be the therapist, right? To have their clients lay down on on a couch with a pillow and feet up, right? It's a space where you now have a resource to be able to say, hey, client, this is where the family communicates, right? This is where the family's identity is. Here's some questions, here's some information. Now use this and the values of who your family is, and now have a conversation, right? Have that conversation to really hear and understand who these people are within your family. And so each one of these, right, as you can see with communication, we believe that respectful sharing and respectful listening equals great communication. And so within there, right, we'll put 4 questions that I think the family can take to really start opening that up and having some of those conversations. Also, what we do is we take all the heirs and we combine them into one heir group instead of little Johnny getting yelled at all the time because he scores everything horribly. So everybody is weighted in that aspect as well. But each one of these will give a resource and just ways that they can kind of dig in and have conversations, right? So same thing with cohesion, identity, right? As I talked about earlier, sometimes identity scores are lower because again, we haven't had that conversation. We haven't defined who we are. Well, now we just did values. We know who we are. We should immediately see those scores now improve based upon that aspect. But again, there's questions and then resources that the family can kind of work through on help through that piece out. So that's culture. I'll pause there before we go on to the third report, which is the views. All right, I'll keep it moving. So this report, out of all the other reports, you would probably do once, maybe once every 7 years, but every other report I would do on a yearly basis. This one is a really great intake form. It's a really great side-by-side. So it's a great information for the advisor to understand who their clients are, right? And we'll even go into that first question of how would you describe your financial condition growing up? Well, John says lower middle class, but Jane came from upper middle class. You know that they view money differently. So it's a way for you to maybe have a way to think about, hey, decisions may come up. I may see that this may be an obstacle that I need to overcome as their advisor to maybe see what's going on with them, right? But it's also really cool alignment conversations for the spouse to have. I've been married 18 years, and these are conversations me and my wife have never had, right? Some of these we just, oh, what is money to you? That's not a conversation. I think that's normal dinner time talk. Maybe it is, but it wasn't in our space. So it was just a kind of a cool aha moment for some of these people. But you could even say from this fact of like too much inherited wealth can be a real handicap to happiness. Well, if John's like, yeah, I agree, too much can be, but Jane's like, no, my babies are getting everything. Right? There may be conflict coming up that you have to have a conversation with, but also this is a real life example from one of David's clients is that in a term of a specific dollar amount, what would you consider to be the ideal amount? He put 2 million, his client did, and his client's spouse put 30,000. And so 1, it's a disconnect, but 2, it was an aha moment for John of like, oh, my wife doesn't know how much money we have. I'm going to take this and we're going to go have a conversation. I'm like, I don't know how you missed that much money, but again, it's a space where the couple to align and for you and the client to have a better understanding of who they are. And so, but again, these don't change as much as some of the other ones. So again, this is probably the one report. This one takes the longest, but it's probably the one report I would do, one every 7, maybe 10 years, depending on, again, children starting to get older. So we can talk about the specific dollar amount, things like that. I'll pause for a second. And how are we doing on time? I just
I
want to
think
make
we're
sure.
good on there. We're about halfway.
Okay, cool. The fourth report is, again, a fan favorite because it's a quick, easy stack ranking exercise. It's easy to send out, and most of our clients will send this one out first individually because, again, it's a quick way to do it. It gets them in the habit of how to kind of do some of these exercises, but it gives you some really awesome information in a couple different ways. A lot of times when we're speaking to a couple, there's a talker and there's a thinker. Our human inclination is to talk to the person that's talking back to us. And so eventually that thinker slowly stops coming to these as this isn't really a part of, like, I don't feel like I'm a part of this, right? Maybe I'm not feeling like I'm being respected or heard in this piece. And then we wonder why we have a 70% in death and divorce, the spouse leaves and goes to another advisor. This way you get, before you go and meet with them, what are their top 10 priorities, right? So when we think about things that we want to accomplish in life, right? We want to do everything, but we can't. So how do we slowly start knocking things off the list right from the jump? What's important to you, right? So together you will get what is a top 10 from each of them. There's 25 different priorities we have in there. What are their top 10, but then also what's their top 5 shared? So now knowing going into this meeting, right? So Jane's number one is financial literacy, right? It could be, what does that mean to you? Is it wanting to get you up to speed? Is it your children? What does that look like? Unpack that for me. Or even intentional fun. Like, what does that mean? Because a lot of times, right, that space of it could be, hey, I want to save this money. I want to be smart with this money, but also intentional fun is a part of that value. How do you mirror those two, or how do you have that conversation with them to make sure that they are doing that? They're living that out. Where John, on the other hand, right, his is business succession planning, right? That's going to be a different conversation. Estate planning, capturing family history, life purpose. But then those are the top 5 with them. So what this does is it gives you almost accountability of like, hey, this is what we did and accomplished this year. Because when we do this again, you're gonna look at it and go, oh, hey, 4 out of these 5, we checked it off. And the cool thing is, if something isn't checked off, let's say financial literacy is there. Hey, so we went through this. There's a couple programs we went through. What does that look like? Again, how do we help you get through this space? Or what would be that level of financial literacy that would get you to check this off? So it's a way to, again, you're engaging in what's important to them and how to get them to that next level. So I'll pause there. Any other questions with that piece as I...
Nick, so can you customize this list or these selections for your business?
Not
Just
yet.
the set.
It
Okay.
is a set of 25.
Okay.
Great question, though. We are taking notes too. So this is our version 1, right? So again, as we continue to add more stuff in this and things like that, we'll continue to be flexible with this.
Okay, and one question that I got before that I was going to wait till the end, but now we're looking at this, I think it's a good time. Can they white label this?
So yes, kind of going back to, the beginning, we'll put in what your logo is. So the only thing that'll look like it's coming from Corenology is the powered by, but the Corenology on the left would be your logo. So yes, it would be white labeled to whatever business that you use.
Whatever yours. Great, thanks.
So yeah, the Heritage Institute would be in the bottom left. So the 5th and final report is your obstacles to wealth. And most of this, to really kind of think about this is the obstacles to wealth and the wealth transfer. And so there's 3 pillars that we look at of 3 areas that people struggle with when it comes to that. One is being regret, mistakes of the past. And this could be, hey, I missed ball games. I missed recitals. I wasn't there. The marriage failed, right? These could be some of those things. And the result could be is I owe this to them because ... right? And so if a client were to score high on this, that could be a way to kind of ask that question of, hey, talk to me about this regret of the past that you feel like you owe, right? And the potential result is, dependent trust fund babies, right? That's how we create that behavior by just giving from that aspect. The second one would be paralysis, right? Hidden in the present. So maybe it's, hey, I know who these kids are. I know what they value. I'm just afraid to have this conversation with them about money, right? In 4 years, they're going to get a lump sum of money. In 10 years, they're going to get X. They know that our value of, the amount of money we have is this amount, right? Every kid, no matter how, not sharp they are, they can take the net worth of the family, divide it by how many children there are to come up with what they think their worth is going to be. And so a lot of times we live in that ambiguity. They're going to start having those conversations anyways. And so we like to talk about, it's not about transparency as much as it is about authenticity. And so we would never recommend anybody show, hey, what the net worth bottom line is, because again, that's ever flowing, right? But what is the authentic conversations we can have? And I'm going to get to that here in a second. And then worry of an unknown future. And this can mean a couple different things, right? Maybe John is heading towards retirement. And so many times we know clients that know how to become wealthy. They don't know how to be wealthy. And so maybe that manifests in that aspect of it. It could be, hey, retirement, or it could be, hey, there's so much money that we don't know how this money is going to affect not only our kids, but their kids, right? That's type of that generational wealth that they could be walking into. And so it goes back to that earlier statement is, we start seeing these numbers peak a little bit. That's the hope of how do we start preparing the kids for the wealth instead of, hey, we're making the money, we're preparing it now, right? There's always been historically the two choices of, I'm just going to give them everything and it is what it is. And hopefully I don't ruin them. Or it's, you know what, I'm just going to give it all to charity because again, I don't want it to ruin them. Our hope is, right, is that we can open up a third door because we prepared these kids. And so many times, right, our hope is that our kids become so self-reliant, so self-sufficient that they don't need any of this money. But because they're so self-sufficient, they're so independent that we wouldn't mind giving them everything, right? And I think that's the ultimate success when it comes to this transfer of wealth is that they get there. But again, like on core culture, we give ways to help reduce this. And so even going back to paralysis, and we'll give you these 3 questions for free that you're able to steal. But when we think about the family dynamic and some of the ambiguity that we live in, we feel that every kid should be able to answer these 3 questions. The reason a lot of them can't is because the parents haven't come up with the answers, right? So when we think about a family and whatever that net worth may be and whatever the things that the resources that they have for those kids, that those kids can answer, what can I expect of being a part of this family, right? What does that look like for that family? It's not a, set in stone, this is what the number one answer is, but it's what can I expect? What should I not expect? Right? Well, I know you did the math of what it is divided by 4 kids. That's what you should not expect, right? Because we're going to talk about it in this way. And then what is expected of me, right? Is it, being self-reliant, being self-sufficient? Is it for them to kind of go through and, accomplish college, things of that nature? What are the things that the family set forth? And that's the way to help some of that paralysis of just the ambiguity that a lot of times the silence and avoidance that we live in is being able to really open up that transparency within that family. And the same thing with ways to do it with the unknown future. So those would be the 5 reports. Again, you can send them all separately, individually. So, if you want to attack one at a time. So my recommendation is the priorities, always send that one out first because we're going to start in Q1. This is the direction we're going to go. And then maybe Q2, we open up to more of a qualitative conversation. Let's get to know you. Let's get to know your family. What do you really value? Let's bring in the culture aspect. And then you can bring in, hey, this is another one that we have when we talk about transfer of wealth. What are the obstacles that we have in that aspect as well? So when we think about next steps, we would love everybody in the call to do this like with your own family, right? So we have the QR code, fill that out. We'll send you the assessment that you can go through this if you want, your spouse, your kids, or even just yourself to go through it. We are happy to have you go through that on that aspect of it. I know we may have gone a little bit quick, but hey, I want to stop, just open it up for questions and anything you guys may have.
Yeah, let's go open up for questions. If people have questions, go ahead and put it in the chat and stuff. One of the things is that as I looked at this and we were talking about with families, when you're working with families, they don't like to do a one and done assessment. And it's like, okay, that was cool. Now what? I mean, so having it build, is one thing. But I'd like you to talk a little bit more about most of the times we take these assessments and then we'll build on it with something else and something else and something else, but we rarely go back and take the assessment again.
Right.
And so the whole concept of, like like I said, I loved Gretchen's story about her son took, I think, what was it, when he was 12, independence was his number one.
Yep.
But by the time he's 14, it was cohesion or
I
something.
mean, I think we got a couple minutes. She's literally sitting right here.
Okay, well, bring in Gretchen.
She's fun and entertaining too, so we'll bring Gretchen into the story because I will
Well,
slaughter it.
You're setting some high expectations. I'm not that funny, but yes, I am here. And my son, yes, he took his assessment originally when he was 12. We did it again. He just turned 14. And in the middle of, he initially was independent. He wanted independence. And you could tell in the way he interacted with me and my husband and things that you get slightly frustrated with your kid over. I'm like, oh yeah, he wants independence. Of course he doesn't want help. And then he starts making more friends and starts connecting, and he's a teenager. And we take the assessment again, and his independence drops off and connection comes on. And it makes a lot of sense because my husband and I are highly focused on connection. It's one of our family's top core values, but now it's his also. And you see it in the way he's taking care of his friends, making sure he's a sports related kid. He's very sports oriented. And you can see it in the way he is taking care of his teammates.
Mhm.
He doesn't want independence from his teammates. He wants connection with his teammates so that they have success on the court. So, and I just know as he gets older and older, he is not a talker, right? Like when he was born, somebody told me they had two college football player sons. And she was like, okay, you have a boy, you get 3 questions a day. That's all you get. And don't waste it on how was your day? Fine, you've lost a question. Well, my son is that kind of talker. He just doesn't like to talk. But when I get this core information about who he is inside, it's okay that he doesn't like to talk. It's not like he's holding out on me. It's just who he is. But I get this information and now I know to behave differently as a parent. So
Very well done.
there's my little kid information, but the same holds true for the way I treat anyone. So Nick, one of his top core values, if he hasn't mentioned this, is humor. And I know when Nick starts telling a joke, something might be wrong. Because that's the way he deals with society, right? Like he's going to use humor to address things.
Good.
My number one top value is responsibility. And you know that I am going to do everything I can to do what I said I was going to do because it's my core value. Now, what I love about core values, and I'm totally on a tangent now, but
It's your fault, Rod. No.
Yeah, no, fine.
what I love about core values is that you can hear someone's core values. So you hear that my core value is responsibility, and you know how I'm going to tend to behave. You also know what might potentially frustrate me. So often when we're upset about things, it is because a core value has been, somebody has done something that is opposite of your core value, right? Like honesty is my core value and you tell a lie. That's going to make me really upset. But part 2 is if you dig deeper and you have time to ask the question of where did this core value come from?
Mhm.
Then you learn so much more about someone. So my core value, and I'll be authentic here, I believe is responsibility because I came from a household that was incredibly irresponsible. My parents did not take care of the children. They did not go to work. They did not clean their house. They didn't do anything they were supposed to ever do. And I witnessed the pain that it caused their kids, their family, their neighbors, everybody around them felt pain because of their lack of responsibility. So I want to never do that to the people around me. I want to be the opposite of what I witnessed. So now that I've told you my why behind it, you not only understand what I'm going to do, but you understand my why.
Mhm.
And it's so easy to get to that with people when you just start with that core value. You can ask a question and you're immediately able to get information you wouldn't have had otherwise. So as an advisor, you're asking them the things they love to do. They love to fish. But fishing doesn't tell you, I, at my core, value responsibility, and I value it because of this. It gives you a whole different place to have conversations that you wouldn't have known to have.
I mean,
I was
even,
chuckling because, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, even to piggyback on that story, I was having a conversation with somebody and their number one core value is faith. And the number two is integrity. And I said, hey, I know where the faith one comes from, but talk to me about integrity. And he goes, that's a good question. He goes, well, I was raised a pastor's kid. And so then my humor wants to make something awkward and go, oh, so you were a hellion, right? But his response is that, yes. And he goes, I had to be perfect, right? I had to dress a certain way. I had to show up a certain way. I had to talk a certain way. Like I had to, so many other things with consequences would happen. And so for me, he goes, as I have grown up and want to really show what my authentic faith and authentic self is being true to myself, right? And show up the way that I show up and really have integrity in that aspect. And he just kind of had this like pause of, wow. He's like, I didn't realize that connection until just now of where that piece came from. And so thank you for that. And it was a really cool moment that we both had of kind of walking through where that journey came from on integrity. So
To me, it's so fun because Nick didn't do anything. He just opened a door. The person did all the work.
Right.
And the advisor gets the credit for giving them this information. Like, oh, you care enough about me. You cared to give me this information about myself. Oh my gosh, you cared enough to give me this information about my kid who doesn't talk to me because he's not a talker. And he just is never going to be a talker. I know he won't be, and it's okay. In fact, I'll make you chuckle a little bit. One day I was like, oh, why didn't you tell me that, honey? And he's like, well, you didn't ask. You didn't ask that question, so I didn't think to tell you. In zero piece of who he is he trying to hold back. He just doesn't think to tell me. But I know that at 20 years old, his core values are going to change. They're bound to change. I want him to continue to change who he is. That's part of growing up. But when I see it change, it gives me the opportunity to say, okay, kiddo, he might not like it if I say that anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, so I see your value changed. What happened? Tell me your story so I can know more of you, because I don't get to be with him all day, every day anymore. Like that's the beauty of raising a kid to be independent. You are not with them anymore. But now I have a trick to learn what's going on in his life when he is just probably not going to tell me. Now, I'm also praying that he marries a wife that will talk to me and tell me everything. But until then, I have this little tool that helps me.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
No, I was chuckling because Louise put a thing in the chat about her son's the same way. Three questions, no small talk.
Thank you.
Louise is not a
you.
3-question, no small talk person, you know. So, but you know, and it's one of those things. I love the stories about as the kids grow older, because sometimes we don't, as parents, don't really recognize how much they're changing, because it's the you know, it's the frog in the beaker, right? You don't notice it because it's happening slowly.
right.
And I probably would not have noticed his change from independence to connection
Right.
if I just one day would have been like, oh, you're not acting frustrated when I'm not giving you that freedom that you need to be independent.
It's like,
One day,
you got over it.
oh, you
Yeah,
got
you got
over,
over it. Yeah.
Right.
oh, you're recognizing in your life you have it. I think it's probably team focused because he's so involved in his team, but he can say he wants that connection because he knows that when he has that connection, they're more successful as a team.
Mhm.
So I can see why independence is out and connection is in.
Cool.
So, any other questions?
Nick, I was thinking about the question about it being paper, and you made the comment that you have worksheets that could work with. What if an advisor has like an intake form that they normally use for their clients? Could they like sprinkle in or have like maybe the priorities listed and then enter it into the software for the client instead of having the client do it?
They can send themselves the assessment, but I think something is magical that happens when they're in the process of doing it.
Right.
I like
Okay.
stack ranking that. And it's not unusual nowadays for people to um do a little bit of paper and a little bit not. But one of the things that we're offering, because we are a startup and new, is we're designing a lot of the implementation for advisors. So an advisor that uses a paper intake form, I mean, more and more and more, that is becoming more obsolete. So we're
Mhm.
helping them learn systems that they can just put that right into some kind of also online version, and you
Mhm.
Okay,
send
cool.
Corenology off, you send that intake form off all at once, and they do it all online. And it's super
Okay.
easy. We have somebody in our team that's really good at this stuff. So she gives solutions to advisors that are
Mhm.
paper focused because,
Perfect.
that transition is a healthy thing.
And our
Yes.
hope, right, is that this doesn't look like, oh, it's going to be this much more work, right? And it should be actually less work, right? Because you're doing some of the prep prior. And so that the conversations can be really about going deeper about who they are. So we like to say, it's could be 10% more work for, 100% more gain, right? On that aspect of it. So again, it could look like, oh, yeah, this is a whole new system and whole new tool. That's where it's, we want to say, hey, hold on. We do the full onboarding, full training. When we have clients that, I just got off one just the other day of they send it off. We reviewed it together as I help part of the onboarding process is like, hey, I'll pick apart things, help see what they're seeing. We'll have conversations to make sure that people are ready and prepared to have these conversations. But yeah, we will. It shouldn't feel like more work. It's different. So of course, change is hard for everybody, especially as we get older. So our hope is to help through that journey and through that process as well.
And one question that I had, and then Carrie just put it in the box too, is can you take some of this, even if you're breaking it up, and make it as part of your discovery with the client? I mean, can you be asking the questions and filling it out as just part of what you're doing and working through it as as the client?
I guess, yeah, you have the freedom and
Yeah.
flexibility
Okay.
to run this and do this within your own practice. And that's our hope, right? Is that you can
Make it
make it
your own.
apart and make it
Yeah.
your own. So yeah, if you want to sit side by side with the client and ask and talk and go through it together, yeah, I mean, that's definitely a way to do it.
I would say that there are some real benefits to letting them independently, husband and wife, do these things,
Mhm.
because as we said earlier, as Nick said earlier, wives tend to leave when they inherit that money 70% of the time, even though it's been their advisor, because they're not connected.
Right.
Well, the wife has a chance to fill these things out independently, then she is completely heard independently. And the advisor can say, I see you're
Mhm.
excited about financial literacy, right? Like, I see what you care about, instead of, hey, what do you two care about? And the talker talks through it. And then the wife tends to just not say anything and floats away. Right. So it gives you a chance for an independent information.
Cool. And then the $1 million question, which hopefully the answer is not $1 million. What do you charge for this? I mean, what's what does this
Just under $1 million.
just under that?
Just under. So it's a great deal. Yeah, I mean, for you and being a part of this program, right? Normally this is a $500 a month SaaS product that is usually by per seat. So if you have one advisor, we charge $500 a month for this, and so on and so forth. Being a part of the Heritage Institute, we are again cutting that down to $125 a month, and then also waiving that $500 implementation startup fee as well. Again, just to give people access to it and being a part of, you know, the Heritage Group.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Yeah. Lori, did you okay, Nick, we were worried about this. We're doing pretty well. We're at an hour and 50 or at 1:56 from my time. So we're 4 minutes early, that's pretty good.
Try to fit it in right there.
Perfect.
Anything else that you had, Lori?
You guys did a great job. Thank you so much for being willing to share with us this great tool, and it's so exciting to see. So
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk about this. Again, we're still fairly new, right? We call ourselves a new baby startup, but you know, our big thing is how do we get this out there, talking about it more with individuals. Just this excellent resource that can come alongside you in your practice to really kind of dig in and understand your clients on a different level.
Yeah.
Yep.
Perfect.
thank you guys so much.
Thanks a lot.
Hey, it's really good to be here. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.